today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about
The Hidden Cost of Financial Indecision with Stuart Hack, a great accounting professional. Tolerance for all kinds of stuff, a vision for where you want to go, not willing to change lanes or make a change until you can see the way to it.
If you go into a marriage or you go into a partnership, you should know what your role is going to be. And it's okay if you're the passive one, as long as everyone is on board with that.
Whereas people who go into business partnership and aren't married to each other or living together, they think it's going to be completely unemotional. And what they find out is that partnership is pretty loaded, and they're kind of thrown back by the experience of being business partners. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I'm Rich Heller, and today I'm here with my new friend, Stuart Hack. We're in a Chamber of Commerce together. And how are you, Stuart?
I'm great, Rich. How are you?
I'm getting better and better every day in every way. I'm getting better and better. And
Sounds like lyrics to a song.
You know what it is? I think it came from a Saturday Night Live, actually. Yeah, so there was a Saturday Night Live, and there was a character who was like a wellness coach, and he'd open up and say, "Every day and every way, I'm getting better and better." It was like that. So it's a little sarcastic. Let me tell you guys about. I think it is. Yeah. Let me tell you about Stuart. Stuart is the managing member of Hack Tax and Accounting Services, providing tax and accounting services to individuals and small businesses and partnerships since 1988. And he's worked with all kinds of folks. He holds a degree in mathematics and accounting. But he also has this hardcore sports interest where he was one of the play-by-play voices for the Albany State Great Dane football, and I actually know it's a personal interest of his that he's going to keep pursuing, which is kind of cool, Stuart.
I never thought at this age I'd still be doing stuff like that, or even looking at that idea of doing stuff like that, but here I am.
There's some really Stuart's here because he's got a good voice. That's the new bar that everyone else has to reach for, which is
it makes up for my face made for radio.
I'm a guy, what do I know? But I don't think you're that hard to look at. But a lot of people be listening to this and not watching it. All right, so Stuart, the first question I ask everyone when they come on this show is, how did your heart lead you to do the work that you do?
I've always been fascinated with numbers, and that led me to get a bachelor's in mathematics. But growing up, I was a big sports fan, and I used to, my idea was I would become the statistician for the New York Mets. That was what I was going to do. I was 8 years old. That was what I was going to do. And that was after playing Little League for 1 year, where I was going to be shortstop for the New York Mets. After 1 year of Little League, I said, let me do their stats. I got my bachelor's in mathematics. What I learned there was you didn't see too many numbers. It was very theoretical. And I needed something with numbers. My dad was an accountant. For many years, he worked for the federal government as an auditor. He did taxes on the side. You always say, I never want to do what my parents do. And I was like that for a while, but at some point I broke down and I said, I might as well do it. And this is after, I remember in college, I lived with 5 other guys in a suite, and I was in charge of keeping track of the phone bill, who owed what. And I had this itemized thing of like, all right, this is what they owe. This was their long distance calls, because this is before cell phones and all. This is
I remember those days. I'd like to tell you I'm too young to know what the frick you're talking about, but continue.
So, I would send them, and I didn't do, it was before like spreadsheets. It was handwritten, and my handwriting was probably more like a doctor's, but somewhat legible. But when it came down to, when they looked at it, and they're like, you should really be an accountant. So you get a lot of things like that.
Accountant, doctor. Actually, they're not that different. You're kind of assessing, financial health, physical health. There's actually a lot of crossover.
Sure. And as far as the tax portion, I took a job right out of college, and this would probably be more of another topic for a podcast one day. But everyone's got that nightmare job. And my nightmare job was working for a municipal bond firm down in Wall Street, a small firm with a boss who was what you would call a screamer. And even if he wasn't screaming at you, you still get it. So I was there 15 months. I was desperate to get out, and I basically took the first offer that
You
I would.
stayed 15 months? That's amazing.
And and other people, like I would have headhunters, and who this person was, and they'd say, "I can't believe you stayed this long." But I didn't want to. I didn't want to leave a job without having something else that I was comfortable with, and I didn't want to make the same mistake that I made taking this job. So even back then, and I was 24, 25, I really would be sure that I was, the next step was going to be a good one. And I had gotten with a small CPA firm in Midtown Manhattan. Primarily, they did taxes. I had, outside of maybe helping my dad a little bit, I had virtually no tax experience whatsoever. So I was like, sure, why not? And that's really what got me started.
Yeah, those actually sound like the qualities of a great professional, but probably a great accounting professional, tolerance for all kinds of stuff, a vision for where you want to go, not willing to change lanes or make a change until you can see the way to it. That's like steady, super professional. That's who you want managing your money.
Yeah, yeah. Probably then I didn't realize it, but yeah, and it ended up working out. And I worked for a few firms over the years, and I never saw myself as being a business owner, but sometimes you are pushed to a point where you have no choice. So I was at a firm for a period of time, and I got let go. So I was living down in Florida at that point. The job market in Florida is way different than the job market any place that I had ever seen in my life. Again, probably a topic for another podcast. Some of the interviews I had, and it got to a point where I'm like, maybe I should go on my own. And
Nice.
that's what I did.
Nice. All right. Today we are talking about partnerships. Partnerships could be just two partners who found each other. They might be two people who are married or living together, went into business together. It might be a family business with multiple partners, but partnerships in general. And the first question I want to ask you about partnerships is, I know an accountant of your caliber works with intelligent and successful partners. And I also know from previous conversations with you that partnerships can be the big challenge, can be decision making and getting information in on time. I know that not just from talking with you, actually from talking with bookkeepers and financial planners and everyone who deals with long-term money concerns of a partnership. So I'm curious, why do you think it is that these smart people, intelligent, they're successful, why do they delay in decisions that they knew when they met you that they had to be made?
I think that there are people, this is the first time they're a business owner. And I think sometimes it's an ego thing. And a lot depends on how well they know their partners. It might be someone they worked with in the past, or someone they met at a networking thing and they thought there was some synergy there. There are a lot of variables. And I think once you sign the paperwork and now you're partners, has it been discussed who is decisions? If it's, if you have three partners, you divide 100% by three, someone's going to be 33.3334%, you know, and there's certain things that maybe are overlooked in the planning for the setup. And once it becomes a reality, I don't know if everyone is equipped to deal with it in a way that would be profitable.
Yeah, I feel this is huge. What you brought out right here is the challenge of partnerships. Well, let me roll it back. It's a partnership, right? And what we know about ships is they have one captain. They don't have two captains. There's the captain, and then there's the first mate. And I think particularly if you're talking about married folks these days, like 100 years ago, there was going to be one captain. It was probably going to be, probably in America, going to be the guy 100 years ago. Today, it's a little less certain, and it's almost a topic that people dance around. And I think if they're not married, right, there's the idea that, well, we can just figure it out, and instead of, well, one person, the buck's going to stop with one person. And I'm curious, how much of that do you feel like is driven by conflict avoidance or Maybe it's, fear of making a wrong choice. How does elements,
You know,
impact those relationships?
it really depends on the personality. Um, in a lot of cases, you might have one personality that's strong, aggressive. No, the other person might be passive. The passive person isn't going to want to, be involved in too much of decision making. Where as the aggressive person is basically taking it on to make all the decision making, and that's always a good thing. I find even with some of the individual returns I do, where you have a husband and wife, there's certain where the wife is making all the decisions, and that's what I'm dealing with primarily. Um, and there are times I don't even, other than if they come in to sign the return, I never even talk to the husband. And some marriages, like some partnerships, that can work. I think if you go into a marriage or you go into a partnership, you should know what your role is going to be. And it's okay if you're the passive one, as long as everyone is on board with that, and it's okay with it. Where problems arise is maybe someone is not okay with it. Even if it's the aggressive person, they made the passive one to become more involved in the decision making, and they get frustrated when they're like, "Oh, whatever you want to do." It's like a couple trying to decide where they're going to go out to eat for dinner. Oh, you decide. You decide. I go that too.
Oh, no, no, no. There's to do that is to say, I want to go to the Chinese restaurant, knowing that the other person hates Chinese, and then you force them to, I know this game.
I'll tell you if we have time.
I wonder how much that happens in partnerships, whether they're married or not. I wonder how much that is done. They've got a major decision, right? And one of them knows the other one doesn't want to go with choice A, and they say, "Well, let's go with choice A," and the other one says, "No, no, no, no," and they force them to make the decision.
They might if they feel that they can, do that. It really depends how well they knew each other going in.
Well,
And
heard actually from other professionals, and I want to know, this isn't on our question list, folks, so Stuart's going to wing it here. So, but seriously, heard that people who are living together or married actually are better prepared for business partnership because they've already been through all kinds of emotional conflict. Whereas people who go into business partnership and aren't married to each other or living together, they think it's going to be completely unemotional. And what they find out is that partnership is pretty loaded, and they're kind of thrown back by the experience of being business partners. How true is that?
I think it's very true. Absolutely. If you've never been married and you've owned a business and you're going in, you basically have no clue what you're getting into. And that's the recipe for success going in. It's almost like you have two strikes and there's a guy with 110-mile-an-hour fastball ready to fire away.
It's like that's happens to rock bands, Oh, we sound so good together. Let's form a band. That's an instant partnership. But when they were doing it, they were just having a good time. And then it gets real.
Well, so you look at the Beatles. You had two maybe alpha partners in Lennon and McCartney, and then you had Ringo and George. But it got to a point where Lennon and McCartney were not getting along as well. Other variables got brought into the equation, such as Yoko Ono, and as a result, they broke up.
And Linda here could be a handful too. Yeah, so that is actually a really interesting. That's a podcast right there. Why those two were successful together initially, and what happened where the conflict got really good. That is a podcast episode. All right. So anyway, we've got these partners. Married, not married, families, 2, 3, 5 partners, who knows, right? What I'm curious about, and actually, no, let's just pause there for a second, because I know that in law firms, even though they might have multiple partners, they do elect someone to be the board chair or the president. So I think in some ways, when you have more than 3, it gets easier because somebody's got to steer the ship, and we can change who that is every year, which is an interesting idea for 2 partners or 3 partners. But here's the thing: it costs a lot when people delay. I mean, and people know, they know that if you invest in a stock at a certain time, you lose an opportunity. They know that if you don't pay your taxes on time, you lose an opportunity. Or even if you prepay your taxes and then get a huge return, you've put money somewhere else where you could have been using it. But though there are a lot of arguments for doing that. I mean, I know that's not my area of expertise, so I'm kind of talking from a place that's not wise to talk from. We'll just be really careful about how I say that. The question I want to ask you is, so what is cost? What happens to these folks when they dither, when they stall, when they're not sure what to do?
They could lose out on a client where they had to give an answer right away and they just get around to it. Or they could lose an existing client where a decision had to be made on a job and they couldn't take their acts together and they delayed it. Or even a company decision where should we move offices? We're in this space now. Can we afford this? And they go back and forth. And then the space that they finally decide on is gone. So sometimes it's a missed opportunity there. So there are a lot of things that go into happen if you delay a decision. Now, it's not to say you should decide quickly right away, because sometimes if you just do it so quickly, maybe it's the wrong decision. Maybe you should think it out. They always say when you get an email or something that you don't like, or you have to put some thought in, sleep on it. Never answer it right away. If you answer it right away, maybe it's not the way you would have, but if you wait a little bit and you have time to think about it and process it, then you can come back in and answer it in a more thoughtful way and hopefully a more productive way.
I would add that the modern missing piece there is don't let chat answer it right away either. Like if you're going to go to AI for an answer, you even want to sit on that for 24 hours because it's incredibly responsive to where you are in the moment. Even if it's telling you to be reasonable, it may not reflect a long-term choice. I keep thinking about you and that job. Even you toughed it out for months and months and months in that job, but you had already made a decision, and that's what took you through it. And I feel like maybe one of the costs of not making a decision is not knowing which way you're going, not having clarity, not being able to put up with the stressors, that are.
It's in my career, and obviously the first job, you could say arguably I made a mistake. I mean, I learned from it, but it was, the
But
second
you
job,
didn't compound it.
right? I didn't want to take another job.
You didn't send your boss an email saying you are such a da 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 da, and you didn't quit without having a job, and you didn't, but you learned the lesson of how you took that job. Like, I'm going to pick the next one really carefully. I will tolerate this until I see how I'm going to get what I want.
So back in the Stone Age, there was no email when I quit that job. I actually, so when once I started the car with my feet, so when I found another job that I was going to take, so now I had to tell them that I'm leaving,
Oh, that had to be good.
and it was a father-son thing. So at first, I said I'd like to talk to you, and I'd send a note or something because they get busy during the day, with the markets and everything. And the first thing they do when we sit down is that's the way you're supposed to do it. They're very complimentary. So now I'm saying, I've given some thought. I've decided that I'm going to resign. And again, first they're very nice and everything. It says, we're not going to, we'd like to try and talk you out of it. We really like you and all that. Then they ask the question, have you accepted another job? And I said, yes. This is where they got nasty. They said, quote, you were making the biggest effing, though they didn't abbreviate that, mistake of your life. And I looked at him, and I don't know what prompted me to say this back, because here I am, I'm 25. I said, I did that last year.
Well, that was probably the right time for that.
Yeah, yeah. So, I was able to get out of there, and the people I worked with there were super, and some of them I'm still in touch with on social media. But the people I was working for, which is basically a father and a son, it was a great situation.
Well, along the lines of that story, which is it's tolerance of discomfort. How many have you seen in partnerships when they have a tough decision, or a decision that maybe it's a decision that none of the partners really feels comfortable making because it's not their area of expertise. That's not an unusual situation, and they haven't hired someone with the expertise to really lean in and help with it. However, do you see them kind of unconsciously tossing that hop back and forth, the responsibility of that choice?
I see from time to time, anything else in life, you don't want to make it today. You don't want to make that decision today. We'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow, well, I'm still not quite ready, and on and on. in the case of that first firm I worked for, the father son, I don't even know how equal partners they were, but he had the son had nothing. And everybody knew it, that he had no say whatsoever. A lot depends on the dynamic of the partners. Who has more experience coming in? Like with an accounting firm, is everyone or all the partners or shareholders the same age? Is their experience level the same? Because that's a big deal too. And you'd be surprised. I've seen things where they would argue in the beginnings of a partnership whose name should go first. And
Yeah, because that makes the difference. Your name can go first, and you have a 49% share. I get 51.
I don't know how these, I've never had a partner myself, so I don't know how that part is decided. But you have the argument, and I think finally they decided just to do it alphabetical, which I guess everyone agreed to that finally.
Said Tom Abramowitz. Let's make it alphabetical. It's easy.
With the help, my mother's name started with ZW, so it never would have worked for her.
Reverse alphabet.
Yep.
All right. So you see a bunch of this. I know this isn't all you do, but you do see a bunch of this. When you have a partnership that's kind of wrestling with a question or a decision, can you who will spend who won't when you see those partnerships?
Sometimes you can, especially it depends what they're arguing about. If it's something so minute and they're having a problem with that, what happens when they have a major decision? There was one I had where there were three of them, and the argument was who was going to be their accountant. They all had three different accountants. And I think finally what they did, which was the smart thing, is they found a fourth person who wasn't involved individually with the other three to do it.
Yeah.
They were all trying to push their person to do it. And honestly, I was hoping I didn't get it. So that ended up, I think, being
These were just three business partners?
they were people who decided they were doing something separately, and they decided to go in together and do it together. There was some synergy from a professional standpoint where it could work, but I don't know how well they knew each other personally. And that's a big thing too. When you go in with somebody, are they a hard worker? Are they going to stay late to get the job done? Or are they going to run out, and you want some synergy there because you want to be the hardest worker in a partnership, where if there are three of you and you're doing all the work and the other two are leaving at like 4:30, 5 o'clock, then that's an issue, and you get a little bitter about that.
Yeah, no kidding. No, how I feel about the dishwasher. Why do I always empty it? Except I don't. It's just in my mind. But that actually, I think it's true partnerships too. There's a tendency to think I'm carrying all the load, and when people are leaving early, that just reinforces that fear, concern, piss and vinegar. So you work with a bunch of these folks. I'm curious, what is one structure or ritual that help them decide faster?
I think once you make to some sort of decision, don't second guess yourself. I think like with anything in life, I think you never want to second guess yourself and sit back and go, well, we should have done this. You can't get it's done. And hopefully if it's not working out, you learn from it. And if it works out, great. But you want to be forceful. You want to be decisive once you do it. You can't be wishy-washy and go, well, I think it might be the best way to go, but I'm not really sure. So like with anything else in life, you want decisive on it.
I'm not sure how this fits an accounting scenario, but in the work that I've done with partners, what this point for us is usually how does this fit with your mission and for the business? I mean, you have your choice. Is there a choice that fits better than the other? And if not, I mean, if it's just a strict money decision, it might have to do with the long-term financial plan for the company, depending with if they won, right? Let's be honest. A lot of times people they don't have a financial plan besides, oh, it'd be nice to grow a little this year. A lot of times decision-making the root problem can be they haven't gotten on the same page about, the 5-year, 10 for the business in the first place.
like with an accounting firm, like when do you add partners? So you have maybe the initial partners, but there's someone who was working as a staff, became a senior, and you feel that he or she would be good to take that next step and become a partner. And there are a lot of variables with that too. And just like starting a partnership, one of the things you want with somebody is their ability to bring in business. So many partnerships, you might have existing clients from an old firm if you can take them, but in a lot of cases, you're starting from ground zero, and you want people around you that can come in and get business and grow the business, get a book of business. And I would think it, especially when you're looking for a new partner, in addition to being technically sound, you want somebody who can go out there and bring in new business.
Well, let me play devil's advocate to that because I have a partnership that I'm working with right now where one partner is like the freaking creative genius. I thought maybe I'd have some of their product here, but they make some very fancy baked products. We'll just leave it at that. And I bought some. They're pretty good. But she is the creative genius, the packaging, the boxing, the product development. He is more sales, numbers, systems, and a lot of their sales, they have to do sales in two different ways. One is they go to an institution and say, hey, would you carry our product, whether it be a store or an online distributor. And another is just they have their own online store. So he set all that up, and they seem to be working very well together. I mean, even though she's not out doing sales.
Yeah. Are they married?
They are, in fact, married, yes.
Okay. So they came in knowing their strengths and weaknesses, unless they just got married. So that's probably a plus.
They're pretty young, but I think they're correct. I think they walked into this eyes wide open.
So I think it helped. I think sometimes, you see the beginnings of partnerships almost like an arranged marriage. That you work with someone, you're like, oh, I hate this place. We should really go off on our own. And you kind of have the common enemy. Yeah, we're good. It's us against the world. And now these two people are put together, and maybe there isn't that much synergy between them.
Mhm.
And like marriage too, you don't necessarily want two identical people in business. You want a little bit of a variety. Like in like marriage, you don't want, if you're like your partner, that isn't always great. If you're identical, if you have the same sense of humor, same personality, you want a little bit of a variety there.
Absolutely.
Abbott and Costello weren't identical.
No, they weren't.
Um, and so I think,
But I don't know how Abbott would have done with Laurel from Laurel and Hardy, right? They were the same, but they had like a similar vibe. So they're different and yet the same, so
right,
yeah, I get you.
it would have been interesting to
Just reshuffle the deck.
you look at it now, you have a good idea for one of these reality shows. They used to have the wife swap things where you swap wives for like
Yeah.
a week or two. Why don't you swipe comic partners or
Yeah.
sitcom? So why don't you just take, say, Kramer, and you take him out of Seinfeld and you put him next door on Friends, and then say you take Joey and put him in Kramer's apartment, and,
Yeah.
and see how that works out.
I don't know if I could see Kramer saying, when we the shower together, how I'm always use the soap, on my face first and my ass second, and then you go in after me. What do you do? I don't know if Kramer could deliver that line the way Joey did, but that would be interesting. It would be good. But so we digress. So yeah, so like the point, actually, all that digression even is that there has to be some simpatico, some harmony, right? The cast of Friends is very different than the cast of Seinfeld. I mean, there's similarities, there's dynamic, and yet there's something very different about it. There has to be some simpatico, but there has to be something different because that's where all creativity comes from, right?
Right.
If everyone sings the same note, it's a really boring song.
And remember, all partnerships, even the successful ones, there's going to be conflict. No two ways about it. Like in anything else in life, there's going to be conflict. How you deal with the conflict is what is important. So you might not agree on every decision. There might be a decision one partner drags their feet, one wants to act now. But overall, if there's enough decisions where they're successful, then I think it becomes a successful.
I'm going to go back to they have to have the clarity of Stuart Hack in his first job, and that would all conflicts fall aside when you have that. So, question: tell me about, if you can recall, a situation where waiting became more expensive than making the wrong decision.
I would think so. Waiting, I think a few years ago I had to look for office space.
I mean, yours, if it helps.
A client, that off the top of my head, honestly, Rich, I can't know.
Okay, let's go
I
with
think if I
office.
had to, I might be able to think of something, but not off the top of my head.
That's all right. Don't worry, we'll edit that part out.
Okay.
Before I go to the conclusion, what's a client situation you can recall? And I want to be clear, Renz, right now we're just talking. You don't need to conclude all this. So what's it?
A situation that worked out or a situation that didn't work out?
Either.
I would say I believe in one of my old jobs that there was.
So as we're wrapping up here and getting near the end, I think a question I want to ask you is, what's an example of a really hard decision you once saw partners make, and how did it impact the company?
I think there was a partnership that I was working with, and they had an employee which was kind of a mix. One of the partners was very high on this person, thought that he was working all these hours because this one partner worked late at night, and this person was always there. Whereas the other partner felt
What's late at night?
midnight, 1, 2 in the morning.
That's not just late at night, that's early in the morning. Okay, I got it.
Whereas the other one felt that he was not a productive person. He would disappear for like 6, 8 hours during the day. So if he was there at midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, it's not really, he's not working more than anybody else. So you had
Or less.
so it was a little bit of a conflict where one wanted to terminate this person and the other one,
Because he's never here at 11 o'clock in the morning or whatever.
I mean, ultimately they decided to terminate. What happens, obviously by waiting a little bit longer than maybe they should have, they lose more money. They're delayed in hiring someone to come in and replace this person. But it also, and I don't know for sure because I'm not a therapist, but it also may be a rift between the two decision makers who were on different ends of this. Like, okay, you won with this one because I wanted to keep him, but next time.
So they weren't really on the same page about the decision.
I think one wasn't thrilled about it. I think it was one who was a little bit stronger in their belief that this person should go.
I think that there's two kinds of compromise that I encounter a lot in my work. There's compromise. I'm a trained mediator, and there's in the world of mediation, there are a lot of mediators who think you should get to the fastest compromise possible because it reduces the friction. Right. But sometimes the problem with the fastest compromise possible is it doesn't get down to the core values that are behind the position. So the other perspective is before you compromise, you want to find out what's under the position. Why does one person feel that working late at night is such a positive? Why does the other feel that not coming in the morning is such a negative? And, what do those values really mean? And then find a compromise that works with the most overlapping values instead of saying, well, he's got to stay. Well, it might be, the punchline might still be he's got to go. But when those values are in alignment, there's less post-decision conflict. It sounds like that was a really tough and not very pleasant situation for those partners.
And they complained to me, and I'm not physically there to see it. So I can't say you're right or you're right, because obviously in anything, there's 3 sides to every story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like seeing an accident in the middle of a 4-corner intersection, and each corner has a different perspective on it. My last question to pretty much anyone on the show is, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind in your work?
I want to be known as someone who is a hard worker. I don't stay till midnight, 1 a.m., but I do get in 4. So I'm more of a morning person, but I want to be known as a hard worker. I try and listen. You know, I have clients that will come in and tell me personal stuff, and you take on the role of the therapist sometimes, where you listen, and I can't really. I'm not equipped to tell them what to do or prescribe medication. That would be an interesting call. I want to be someone who is known as well-rounded. Obviously, I have other interests. As you mentioned before, I did play-by-play for sports. I've done stand-up. So there are other things about me. I don't want to be remembered for just one thing. And, hopefully everything that I'm remembered for is in a positive light.
Nice. It's too bad you can't do play by play on partner disagreements. They'd probably get you shot.
Actually, what I want to do is when I retire, I want to go into accounting firms and do play-by-play. So I want to announce what's going on, and then I could kind of do both.
You're gonna have a radio station dedicated to that?
And it doesn't have to be just accounting. You could do different. I could have someone come and do a law firm. You can go in and start broadcasting what's going on.
You're gonna have a very specialized audience.
And boom, Joe has just got his 34th tax return of the week out the door.
There you go. Actually, during tax season, they might want that encouragement.
They could. It could be a market for that.
All right. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I will reach out to you again soon.
Okay, I look forward to it.